Level 1 is location, and it determines everything that follows for centuries after the founding decision locks in permanently. Venice was built on 118 islands connected by 400 bridges because lagoons offered natural protection from invaders while providing maritime trade access that generated enormous wealth. Singapore positioned itself on the Strait of Malacca, controlling 25% of global shipping traffic through geographic lottery that transformed a fishing village into a global financial center. Amsterdam sits below sea level, but engineered solutions that turned weakness into waterfront advantage worth billions in real estate value today. The wrong location dooms cities before the first building rises from the ground. Phoenix sits in a desert with no natural water source, importing massive amounts of water from rivers while temperatures regularly exceed 45 degrees Celsius during summer months. You've probably wondered why certain cities feel impossible to navigate while others flow naturally around you. The answer traces back to whether founders respected or ignored the landscape beneath their feet when making decisions that would affect millions permanently. Level 2 is grid, the skeleton that determines how everything connects and whether navigation feels intuitive or requires constant GPS assistance throughout your daily travels across the city. Manhattan's 1811 grid plan created the most valuable real estate on Earth through simple perpendicular streets that anyone can navigate instantly without maps or local knowledge. Barcelona's Eixample district uses chamfered corners that widen intersections by 50%, creating natural gathering spaces at every block junction throughout the expansion area designed by visionary planner Ildefonso Cerdà. The grid decides whether emergency vehicles arrive at their destinations promptly or become lost in suburban mazes with names like Willow Creek Court that lead to nothing at all. Despite being only 1 square mile in size, Melbourne's Hoddle grid produces more economic activity than entire suburban areas 10 times its size. Every trip requires a car, and every intersection becomes a bottleneck during rush hours, trapping inhabitants in cul-de-sac mazes caused by bad grids. You recognize good grid design immediately precisely because you never have to think about it while walking through perfectly legible streets. Level 3 is transit, the circulatory system that moves people efficiently or fails them completely while consuming billions in public funding regardless of actual performance outcomes delivered to riders. The Greater Tokyo Rail Network carries 40 million passengers daily, with average delays under 30 seconds, making car ownership genuinely optional for millions of residents who simply never consider driving anywhere. Zurich integrated trams, buses, and trains into a single timed transfer system where connections happen within 60 seconds at major hubs throughout the metropolitan network. Your city probably has a bus system that nobody uses because it runs once per hour and doesn't connect to anywhere useful for actual residents trying to reach their jobs. The difference between functional transit and transportation theater is frequency, reliability, and integration that treats the whole network as one unified system serving real trips. Instead of penalizing cars with prices, Copenhagen created metro lines that operate every 90 seconds during peak hours, converting former car commuters via simple convenience. The elderly, the young, and anybody who cannot afford a car are stranded in isolation due to transit failures, which compound across generations and neighborhoods. Level 4 is density, the most misunderstood and politically contentious level of city building that generates protests regardless of which direction planners push development patterns. Paris packs 20,000 residents per square kilometer into 6-story buildings where ground-floor shops and cafes are within walking distance of every apartment. Copenhagen's missing middle housing fills the gap between single-family homes and high-rises with row houses, duplexes, and courtyard apartments that feel like neighborhoods rather than dormitories stacked vertically. Most North American cities banned this housing type through zoning codes that mandate either sprawling suburbs or towering condos with nothing in between those extremes. The missing middle explains why housing costs explode while neighborhoods feel simultaneously overcrowded and empty of services that residents actually need daily. Mixed-use zoning lets people live above the bakery, next to the pharmacy, within walking distance of their office, eliminating commutes entirely for lucky residents. You've probably visited European cities and wondered why the streets felt alive compared to your dead subdivision back home where nothing happens. Density done right creates eyes on the street, viable transit ridership, and local businesses that can survive without parking lots consuming half their property. Level 5 is green space, the lungs that keep dense cities from feeling like concrete jungles while providing recreation, habitat, and mental health benefits to residents simultaneously. Singapore maintains 47% tree canopy coverage across the entire island nation, while simultaneously ranking as the world's second densest country by population. Vienna's greenbelt surrounds the city with protected forests, vineyards, and parks that maintain property values while providing recreation within 15 minutes of every single resident. Central Park increases surrounding Manhattan property values by an estimated tens of billions through proximity that everyone wants and few can afford to access directly. Green corridors link remote parks into networks that allow locals to jog, stroll, or cycle for miles without continually breathing. In pollution fumes or crossing busy roads, the best communities consider trees as infrastructure assets rather than cosmetic afterthoughts destroyed anytime a road requires expanding for new traffic lanes. Because developers determined that grass makes less money than another parking lot, your community most likely has one depressing park with malfunctioning equipment. Level 6 is public realm, the shared spaces where strangers become neighbors and cities develop character that distinguishes them from every other collection of buildings anywhere else on the planet. Barcelona's Las Ramblas transforms a simple boulevard into a linear festival where pedestrians outnumber cars by intentional design rather than accident or neglect. Melbourne's laneway network converts service alleys into dining destinations, art galleries, and coffee culture that defines the entire city's identity internationally among visitors. Waterfronts either become public treasures like Copenhagen's harbor pools or private fortresses like most American riverfronts blocked by highways and industrial zones. The quality of benches, lighting, pavement, and planting signals whether a city values people or merely tolerates their existence between buildings as economic actors. Great public realms encourage lingering, spontaneous encounters, and the random conversations that build community across demographic boundaries that normally separate residents. Dead plazas surrounded by blank walls and windswept by poor orientation prove that space alone doesn't create place without careful attention to human scale. Level 7 is identity, the distinctive character that makes cities memorable rather than interchangeable with any other generic development anywhere on the planet today. Sydney's Opera House cost 10 times its original budget, but created an icon worth billions in tourism and global recognition that no marketing campaign could ever purchase. Dubai built the world's tallest building and largest artificial islands, yet feels generic because spectacle replaced the authentic culture that usually develops over generations. The best identities emerge from local materials, climate responses, and cultural expressions that couldn't exist anywhere else on Earth under different geographic conditions. Copenhagen's colorful Nyhavn harbor district attracts millions of visitors annually to buildings that simply reflect traditional Danish merchant architecture, preserved rather than demolished. Your city probably demolished its historic downtown for parking garages and office towers that look identical to every other mid-century urban renewal disaster. Identity requires saying no to generic development that maximizes square footage while minimizing everything that makes places worth visiting or remembering. Level 8 is sustainability, the final level that determines whether cities survive the next century or fail entirely under their own consumption patterns and resource dependencies. Reykjavik heats 95% of buildings through geothermal energy at a fraction of the cost elsewhere, while eliminating carbon emissions that other cities export to distant power plants. Amsterdam's cycling infrastructure moves 60% of inner-city trips by bicycle through protected lanes, secure parking, and traffic signals timed for pedal speed rather than motor vehicle throughput. Regardless of global mitigation measures carried out by international agreements, resilient cities prepare for floods, heat waves, and supply disruptions that climate projections ensure will worsen. Because water independence is more important for island life than nearly any other infrastructure investment, Singapore uses reservoirs, aquifers, and desalination facilities to collect every drop of rain. Cities that successfully complete all 8 levels will prosper, but those that don't will have to spend a fortune correcting errors or seeing citizens relocate to better areas. Like and subscribe for more breakdowns explaining why cities work or make your life unnecessarily difficult.